let's go to the beginning of this. Maybe we can start by, although I'm sure most people know who Whitmer is and what happened, like when the news broke.
Yeah. I'm sure people know who she is. If you don't know who she is, she's the very loud Michigan governor who's been going on a national tour, currently to
Hmm.
grandstand about the
Interesting.
case. But to take it back, to give you guys like kind of the official story, and I'll just make it brief because nothing about the case is simple or brief. It's incredibly complex and very hard to distill. So the official story, right, is that in October of 2020, the FBI arrested 14, it was at first 13, and then they arrested another guy, so 14 total the next day. But October 7, they said they arrested 13 men from two different militia groups who were plotting to kidnap and kill Gretchen Whitmer. They said that these men wanted to instigate a civil war, storm state capitals, and overthrow the federal government, which is just kind of silly and crazy.
Hmm.
And so they were charged with, they broke this case into federal and state. So 6 men were charged at the federal level with conspiracy to kidnap. And then 8 men were charged at the state level for, quote, providing material support for a DT, although nothing actually happened. And they also got them with gang affiliation charges and felony firearm, which is, they claim if you're carrying a gun during the, quote, commission of a felony, it's an automatic gun charge. That's an automatic additional 2 years in prison. So the state guys, a lot of them were looking at like 22 years in prison, although some of them are looking at way more than that, like 40 years,
Wow.
which is crazy. Some of them have a potential future release date of like 2063.
Wow.
And nothing happened. Let's just make that clear. So this is what they charged them with, though. And then they added a superseding indictment where they charged them with additional charges of conspiring to obtain WMDs.
Wow.
And they also charged them with having a destructive device or whatever, which we can talk about what
Yeah.
that is. But so this is the official story, was that these guys, because of Gretchen Whitmer's COVID policies, right, that these guys were angry, and that these militia groups came together during the summer of 2020, held various meetings and FTXs, what are called field training exercises, where they got together. They claimed that, in June of 2020 in Columbus, Ohio, at what the government called the Dublin meeting, they claimed that militia groups, leaders of militia groups from various states got together and that this is where the origins of the plot began, right? At this meeting. They claimed that meeting was called by Barry Croft, who is the gentleman they framed as a ringleader, and then later during his sentencing, they decided he was the spiritual leader of the kidnapping that wasn't. But, come to find out, none of that is true. But that's the official story, that these guys were just mad about COVID policies. They came together, you had militias coming together, organizing from different states. So they wanted it to be a multi-state plot, which is very concerning to me. But that's the story, was that, like, oh, look at these dangerous militia groups, these dangerous, right wingers, whatever. They called them white supremacists and stuff like that. But coming together to organize, and they said that Trump instigated them, that Trump told them, to stand back and stand by. And then that Trump had tweeted out, liberate different states during COVID. He tweeted out, like, liberate Michigan. So they use that to suggest that somehow Trump tweeting liberate Michigan caused these men to do what exactly?
Of course.
To
Of
hold
course.
FTXs in meetings. And so that was the official story, is that this was going to be some kind of kidnapping and assassination plot. There weren't real specifics of, like, well, what were these guys going to do with her, right? They had many stories. So they said that they were going to, the government claims that the guys were going to take her from her vacation cottage and they were going to somehow get her in a boat, take the boat out into like the middle of the lake, and then leave her there
Right. Wasn't
for
there a
her
helicopter included
to
in that plot?
inconvenience her. Oh, that was the other one where they wanted to commandeer the entire airspace. And
Right.
Sean Fix, the guy pretending to be a Navy SEAL, he claimed he could get access to Blackhawks and Hueys. So they were going to, get her from the vacation cottage, presumably in an what do they call it? An amphibious assault. I'm sorry, but
Right.
it's just
I
so
know.
fantastical. But this is what the
It's
government
a bad
actually
Hollywood
said
movie. It's a bad
was
Hollywood
going to
movie.
happen. They were going to launch an amphibious assault and somehow get her from the cottage into a boat, and then somehow they were going to get her from the boat into a helicopter. The helicopter was going to rendezvous with another helicopter, and then somehow this was going to culminate in 200 men storming the Capitol and overthrowing the state government
Sometimes I feel like the government hired people who wrote shows like 24 and said, we need you to write out the script for these insane plots. Because that's what it sounds like. When you think about the image of a helicopter and all these things, it just sounds too much. It sounds too on the nose. And it all worked out because this is 2020. And by that point, tensions are so high. And the media has done such a great job of casting a spell on the fearful to believe anything that they believe is going to put them in harm's way. So like the caricature is just working beautifully for anybody, and it falls right into into the hands of like, look, Trump and his MAGA extremists, they're going to take out a governor. It worked out too perfectly almost.
Well, they wanted it to be multiple governors, and we could talk about that, but
yeah, we should when we get back to it.
That's the official story. That's sort of the rundown. The one other aspect of this was apparently they also had a loose plot or plan apparently to get her from the cottage in the boat. Then they were going to, and somehow in the dead of like winter, in October in the choppy waters, take her across Lake Michigan, somehow get her to Wisconsin, and then they were going to hold a citizens trial. I don't know. They were going to hold some kind of trial or something for her. It's like, what? Some mock trial and then public execution or something. Like, this was never going to, it's the stupidest thing. And this comes from Adam Fox, the man who was homeless living in the basement of the vacuum repair shop. Stoned one time, talking, of course, they're provoking him, and he jokes around and says, wouldn't it be great if we got her, took her over the waters across Lake Michigan, and then we all just hogtied her to a table, and we all just pose around her like we did the world's biggest drug bust. Okay, that is a intoxicated, stoned comment. An intoxicated utterance. This is not like a real plan, guys.
Right.
And the FBI knew that.
But they hear it, but it's like the perfect thing for them to be like, well, now we can keep poking this. We can build something and create this image for me, like, I don't know, tell me what you think. The goal is to what? Just create more tyranny and crack down on militias?
There's multiple goals, in my opinion. So that's the official story now to kind of unravel what actually happened.
Yeah.
I'll tell you. The FBI basically, so it's funny because I want to make sure I'm saving some stuff for the documentary so that you guys have a reason to watch it, but just to show that the investigation allegedly began in March of 2020. It certainly did not. It goes back before that. The FBI used a network of 12 informants. They used 2 to 3 undercover agents, but they also used what are called OCEs, online covert employees. So these are FBI agents that they employ false personas online. And then they're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, they're on social media, and they're pretending to be, a patriot, quote unquote. So this is PACON, right? And militia folks, they're pretending to be that, and then they're creating like Facebook pages, Facebook groups, and then they're funneling people into those. So why is the FBI doing that, right? That's a question. But we know that Steve Robeson, who is a career criminal, this is one of the architects of the Kidnapping hoax. He is also a convicted child sex offender. He has a history, too, of working with the FBI. going back to the 80s, when he was involved in biker gangs, he has a story that he heard chatter amongst the 3%ers of threats against law enforcement, and that he contacted the police to kind of warn them about it. And that's how he becomes an informant in October of 2019. This is a month before the Wolverine Watchmen were even founded by Joseph Morrison. So this investigation goes before the group was even created or founded. And but that's in the FBI's files, by the way. The FBI said under oath, they testified to this story, that's how Robeson became an informant, that he went to law enforcement about these vague threats. And of course, this was just chatter, so that was not documented. Well, we come to find out, evidence now shows that's not what happened at all. He was flagged in something called Operation Bronze Griffin. This was something that social media companies were doing during 2020, where they were voluntarily running keywords, flagging people online for keywords and giving that information to law enforcement. So law enforcement gets Robeson that way because of things he's saying online. And that is actually how he becomes an informant. Dan Chappell, who everybody knows as Big Dan, he was seen as the main informant. Well, really, Roby is the main informant. Dan, I would say, is the secondary one. He's the one that rises to become basically the leader of the Wolverine Watchmen. So there's many reasons they want to do this, right? They want to take over any group that is created. Joe created the Watchmen on Facebook, just as a Facebook group, in November 2019. And by March of 2020, the FBI had infiltrated the group using somebody who is a Iraq war veteran, posing as an operator, posing as one of the heroes that helped rescue Chris Kyle, And so he becomes the XO of the Wolverine Watchmen, the executive officer. And it's interesting because I don't want to give it away, but in the documentary, you're going to find out that the entire idea for the Wolverine Watchmen came from the FBI, not Joseph Morrison. He created a Facebook page that was basically for preppers, right? It was for this guy lives out in the country in Jackson County, Michigan. It really is country for people who don't know. Out there, if you need to have an ambulance or call law enforcement, it's like 30 minutes before they arrive, maybe 40 minutes. You need to know how to defend yourself, but also you need to know kind of like basic medical stuff. These are just good skills you should have. And so the FBI basically took this prepping group and created an actual militia with it. And then the FBI is the one that called all these meetings and had these various FTXs. Now, the Dublin meeting that the government says, where the government claims the origins of the plot began, where it was hatched, they said Barry Croft called that meeting. That was called and chaired by Steve Robeson, the convicted child sex offender and informant. He called and chaired that meeting. And that meeting had about, I want to say 13 to 14 attendees. And in the documentary, you're actually going to see a clip from the meeting itself, from an individual who spoke at the meeting, who was the Ohio target, a man named Jeremy Dieter. He was targeted because he was somebody that would attend 2A events and Patriot events, and he would give public speeches. So that was somebody that the FBI, basically everybody at that Dublin meeting, there were 3 or 4 different FBI informants there, all recording everything, and everybody else was targets. All people from different states that the FBI wanted to basically get involved in this. And so how this played out was the FBI had informants that were posing as different heads of militia groups in different states, right? So they had an informant, Jenny Plunk, who was posing as the head of the Tennessee chapter of I forgot to say this, of a fake militia group completely manufactured by the FBI called the Patriot 3%ers. Notice too that they called themselves 3%ers. So the 3%ers exist kind of as I don't know if you would say an organized militia. I mean, it's sort of known as just like a symbol, right? 3%er. I wouldn't say it's an organized group or anything like that. But in any case, people have heard 3%er.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things you heard about one of the groups that was extreme, quote unquote, on January 6th. They kept saying Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, and 3%ers. Incidentally, all groups infiltrated by the federal government.
My
The vice
goodness.
president of the Oath Keepers was a longtime FBI informant named Greg McWhorter, who had a heart attack the day before he was set to testify at Stewart Rhodes's seditious conspiracy trial. So,
Are you
it just,
suggesting that's a interesting turn of
yeah,
events?
that there's like a weird connection there, right?
It's weird. It's like how
Crazy.
a lot of security or police officers at the Capitol officers took their lives or passed away, you know, in the
Yeah.
days after January 6th. Well, before we go further, I want to go back and ask you more about I think Bronze Griffin.
Oh, sure.
How does that work? Like, they're grooming them online, and like, can you talk about how that relationship starts and then how it then bleeds into reality?
Oh, okay. So just to clarify, Bronze Griffin as the operation is separate from the FBI's OCE type activities.
Okay.
Bronze Griffin was voluntarily, these big tech companies say, hey, we're going to flag certain keywords and we're just going to voluntarily give that information to law enforcement.
They're like
So
dragging the lake.
it's a
for
dragnet. Yeah,
hashtags,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so they give that information voluntarily to the feds, who then look for people that they want to target.
That's
It's
dirty
exactly
work.
the way to find people to target of, hey, here's people mentioning militia online. Here's people who are saying this keyword, that keyword. And so then the FBI takes
Gross.
these people, and apparently, I guess they're putting them in a database, because we also have documentation where it showed Robeson, the informant, they talk about him being given access to a database of targets.
Wow.
So I think that must have been from Bronze Griffin,
That's
of
crazy.
of what this database was. And so it's very interesting that that's how he actually came on the radar of law enforcement, though he didn't voluntarily go to law enforcement because he heard chatter,
Right.
and, you know, was concerned. That's a lie. They flat out lied, and they lied in their under oath and their own documents. And so nothing, of course, has been done to anybody who lied.
Do you?
And so,
Sorry.
yeah.
Do you think you can FOIA request those collections of things from Bronze Griffin?
From the FBI side, not on the end of the private companies.
Not in the companies, right? Like,
yes.
Really?
So more information maybe could come out about Bronze Griffin. I'd actually be very interested in that too, because Mark Zuckerberg testified in front of the Senate committee October 28th of 2020, where he said Facebook contacted the FBI about the Watchmen also. And I think it must have been because it must have been part of Bronze Griffin.
Wow.
But I remembered that testimony, and I have a clip of that. You guys will see it in the documentary, where it's one of those things where you go,
Uh-huh. Yeah. It's
Isn't
so
that
dirty
interesting?
how they outsource this like collection, this agency.
Yeah.
for
How
the
about
hashtags.
Jason Chambers? The
keywords. That's
Jason
crazy.
Chambers was one of the handling agents. He's the one that said he was going to run the Wolverine Watchman case as a TEI. That stands for Terrorism Enterprise Investigation. That's the highest threat level the FBI has within the agency to investigate, basically DT. And that gives the agent the ability to utilize all of the resources of the FBI. So to spend millions of dollars and employ overhead drone surveillance of drones following people at 6,000 feet. You can't see them, you can't hear them. And they're just following Barry every single day as he's driving his truck, you know, and not doing anything for 9 months.
Instead of just carpet bombing a country with drones, with bombs, we're just spying on people constantly with Lockheed Martin spy satellites that are omniscient.
Middle-aged truck drivers just going to work every day and then, you know, playing with their daughters.
So okay, so that's Bronze Griffin doing the dragnet situation. So then OCEs are the people,
FBI's
right?
Online covert employees, where the FBI is maintaining these false personas, operating online, meeting people online, and then funneling them into these groups or into militia groups that were actually created by the FBI out of whole cloth. So the Patriot 3%ers was created by the FBI. Steve Robeson initially posed as the head of the Wisconsin chapter, but then he announced that he became the national commander. And so the FBI, so the FBI is posing as the national commander of a fake militia group. They had other informants posing as other heads of state chapters. They told Adam Fox, the man framed as the ringleader, that he was going to be the head of the Michigan chapter of this fake militia group created by the FBI. The FBI made the Facebook page for Adam for his Michigan chapter, and the FBI administered the Facebook page. The first person to post on it on June 20th, 2020 was Steve Robeson, the pedo informant, and welcoming everybody to the group. And the business card that Adam Fox had that the FBI seized from the basement of the Vac Shack and used as evidence against him was actually given to him by Steve Robeson, who had the same one, you know, but just with his name on it.